Hey, welcome to another episode of the Dodgeball Marketing Podcast. This is the official podcast for DodgeballSEO.com and DodgeballMarketing.com. Glad you're here. Today we're going to talk about doing online marketing competitor research. There are a lot of great tools for doing real deep dive competitor research that are out there that are very expensive, or you could hire a consulting firm to research a bunch of stuff and develop a big report. But there's also a bunch of information hiding in plain sight that can be very valuable for you if you track it over time. So we're going to talk about that. And the way I would recommend thinking about this is that there is some basic information that's just kind of out there in plain sight that you've probably poked around and looked at, but you maybe haven't ever thought about taking all of your competitors and tracking this information in a more disciplined way. So what we recommend is starting a spreadsheet and once a quarter going through and updating these numbers and seeing how they change over time. So you can set your spreadsheet up either by competitor or by date, and then have a set of competitors and the different metrics going left to right. That's probably the best way to do it, and that way each row is just another date, and that way you can sort of ad hoc go in and do it whenever you feel like it, but you can see how things are behaving over time. Or if you're really good, you can do it once a quarter, or even, gosh, you could do something like this once a month. It wouldn't be that hard to do. But it's really easy to go look at the information we're going to talk about and capture it in a spreadsheet and understand where your industry is spending money on online marketing. There are surveys and there are lots of tools, eMarketer, others that do annual reports, but there's nothing like knowing what your competitor right down the street is doing with their online marketing and where they're spending their time and energy.
And what people are saying about them.
And yes, and what people are saying about them. So we're going to talk about some things that are quantitative and a few that get a little bit more qualitative. And we'll talk about how to do that in a quick spreadsheet. So this is what we would call, I don't know a better phrase for this, but sort of a poor man's competitor research report. This is something you can do yourself. This is a DIY approach to competitor research, and we found it to be eye-opening. And we've been surprised when we've presented these, when we've done these for people at how much of this information just wasn't known. But it's all public information. So we got a few bullet points we're going to get into, so let's jump in. So number one, I've got number one, run each URL through SpyFu and see the pattern of the history of their SEO rankings.
So SpyFu is what?
SpyFu is a really great set of SEO tools. SEMrush and SpyFu are two that we really like for different reasons, and there are a handful of others. But with SpyFu, you can see the history of how many keywords a website has ranked for in the top 5 pages of Google search results. So think about there being 10 results on a page, so about the top 50 listings, which is a little bit of a ballpark figure to know, okay, what's the overall amount of exposure that this website has in search engines compared to another website. Right. And so if you take each website and run it through, you can get 2 measurements with SpyFu that you can capture and lock in. What's the current number of keywords for which they rank in the top 5 pages of results? So that's a whole number, and it's usually hundreds or thousands. So you might have in your spreadsheet 235. And then SpyFu has another chart that's really helpful, the sum of ranks. So they give a number that is 50 points for every number 1 placement for every keyword the site ranks for, all the way down to 1 point for every 50th slot that a website ranks for, added up as a whole number. So this number, if they're ranking for, say, 235 keywords, this sum of ranks score may be in the tens of thousands. But you can just capture that as a whole number, and that's going to give you your own little spark line, your own little tracking tool for that website, for knowing how they're ranking in search engines over time. And often what we've seen with these SpyFu rankings is a really great ranking at one point that then just drops off. And that tells you a little bit about what's going on under the hood, because it tells you, oh, maybe they got away from pursuing their SEO strategy. Maybe they are kind of running low on budget and can't invest in that. So there's some real intuitive things that you can start to pick up and infer on what's going on under the hood if you start to track some of these publicly available numbers over time. So that's number one.
Yeah, you can also follow individual keywords over time, right? So
Oh yeah, totally.
Pool installation San Diego. If you're a pool installer in San Diego,
Mhm.
you want to know where you are, where your competitors
Mhm.
are.
That's another one, and SpyFu actually has that set up as well. You can load 10 to 20 keywords in a report and track those over time. And so, yeah, that's another great way to use SpyFu to do this.
Yeah,
now, that's
those
not
are worth
strictly,
thousands of dollars. Those
Yes.
keywords are.
That's right. That's not strictly a competitor tracker. It's a keyword tracker, but SpyFu has that exact same capability. Yeah.
Right. Let's move on to number 2, and I would call this category just online review sites. So this, Michael, is both qualitative, as you mentioned, and quantitative. So quantitative, you can go to your let's talk about all the ones. Google My Business, Yelp, Facebook has reviews, and then depending on what industry.
And then if you get into some industries, you've got stuff like Home Advisor.
Exactly, individual niche-focused review sites. So whatever is appropriate for your industry, find out what the review sites are. It's always going to be Google, and most of the time it's going to be Yelp.
Yeah.
So, and this is a good way to get an overall quantitative view of how people think about the business. Is it 3-star roll up, 4-star, 5-star? But the real meat in this, and this takes a little bit more time, is looking at the comments, the individual reviews, the text of the reviews. So this can tell you, you can get really good insight on like what is selling for these people. So if you're a shutter company and people keep talking about, I love my new plantation shutters, or whatever different type of.
They might talk about the quality of the products, the speed of the installation, the experience, the clean work crew.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and that tells you what matters to the customer, right? And so all this SEO, pays all this, it really boils down to serving a customer on the other end of all this technology, right? So online reviews sites are great because you can actually read and if you read enough of them, you'll start to realize patterns. And you'll go like, man, everybody's talking about how clean the crew is. We should that matters to customers, so we should really put effort into doing that. Or everybody's buying plantation shutters. Like, why aren't we selling plantation shutters? So it gives you an idea of what people care about, what people like, and what your competitors are actually selling.
So let's review this. You've really got 3 different things that are valuable from this exercise. You've got, number 1, how many reviews are they getting?
Right.
Like what you could just capture what's the cumulative number of reviews they have.
And that's a good sense of opportunity.
Right.
If your competitor has 3 reviews, like, well, gosh, there's nobody. If all your competitors have less than 10 reviews, well, like, it's
push down on the gas.
It's yours for the taking.
Yeah. And then next is what's their star rating.
Yeah.
And then next, and I'll call that third category, the one that you outlined, I'll call it taking the temperature. Yeah. Because what you've really got to be able to do, if you're doing this in your spreadsheet, you've got to just take the temperature each time you do a check-in and say, what's going on with this company? Is it good or bad? And then what are people saying?
Yeah.
And so that's a way.
And are there any themes that develop over time?
And I would try to capture that in just as few bullet points as you can to keep it really tight. And so you can have these 3 different measurements. All right. Next up, something that you can do is go to their YouTube channel. If a company has a YouTube channel, or you can even do this with other video marketing platforms, but they're not going to give you really as much information. You could definitely do a temperature check if they're using Vimeo or Wistia, but YouTube is actually going to give us some really valuable numbers. You can go to Vimeo and capture a handful of things, or excuse me, YouTube and capture a handful of things. You can look at how many videos they've published. What's the total number of active published videos they have. You can see how many views their channel has. And just a side note, that's only going to show you the views for the videos that are active. If they've delisted a lot of videos over time for products that have been retired, whatever, you may be seeing a partial number. So this number of views could go up and down. So that's actually helpful to know. You can see the number of subscribers they have. And so those numbers tell you how much are your competitors spending on video strategy. How much traction are they getting? You can qualitatively guess at some of this stuff and say, well, I don't see or hear about them doing much video. Or you can go start capture numbers and have qualitative data that tells you, oh, wow, they've added 5 more videos. They're being very consistent in their video strategy.
And here's a good way to kind of take that qualitative and quantitative data and use it in your own strategy. You could go to, let's take our shutter look at what their most viewed videos are. So maybe they're how to properly install plantation shutters is their most, and it's by far their most viewed video.
Right.
You're like, then that gives you intel of like, okay, this is what a lot of people are searching for this. So you turn around and you do a piece of content on your website.
Yep. If you see a hot video on a competitor site, you can go turn that into a blog post.
That's a great sign that shows demand. Yeah. And then that's an opportunity because that likely is resulting also in search volume on Google.
I'll tell you something else we see. We see sometimes content that pops up really well, and we can see the numbers for it in video, and then retroactively add those as bullets to services pages.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Next up is inbound links. So when you're using a tool like SEMrush, and again, if you're a member of Dodgeball Marketing or if you're a member of Dodgeball SEO, you don't need to pay for any of this. We'll pay for all this as part of your program. But looking at the number of inbound links to a website, inbound links are a big factor in SEO. So you can actually use SEMrush and just go see for each of these sites, how many inbound links do they have? And a second number you can add as a separate set of columns is, you can do this for each competitor, is how many different domains are linking to them. And this is all information. You're not hacking into their Google Analytics. You're not cheating. You're not doing anything. You're just getting publicly available information. The reason not everybody has it is it's through tools you have to license to use. But the number of inbound links for each of these sites fluctuates and changes over time. And so you can monitor that and see which factors are really driving who's winning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love it. Let's do the next one. We'll call this social sniffing.
And this is a pretty big category. This is probably the bulk of what we want to cover for the rest of this episode.
Yeah. So this is basically go to each social channel. So think of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn.
You can even kind of lump YouTube into this, but we've already talked about YouTube.
All the social channels out there, and get an idea for how many followers are on each channel that your competitor has, and also what kind of engagement or activity. And this tells you, I think the main thing this tells you is sort of where the action is for your particular market. So here's an example. If you're a HR benefits consultant and you know who your sort of competitors are in your market, and you notice that your competitors are they have a Facebook page, but it doesn't really get engagement. That doesn't necessarily mean there's a huge opportunity to gobble up Facebook. It might mean that all the action's happening on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go to LinkedIn and you see posts that get 20 comments, 30 comments, shares, likes, that gives you a sense of like, where are these people hanging out when they're and what are they engaging in, and that might tell you we need to steer more. This is where the action is. So we're okay with sort of maintaining Facebook, but LinkedIn is where we need to be.
Yeah, if a really small company that's a direct competitor to you has a lot of activity on LinkedIn, that kind of tells you, wow, they're investing time and energy in LinkedIn.
Right. Mm-hmm. But a competitor having a low follower count doesn't necessarily mean there's opportunity there, because again, it's about the customer, right?
Right.
So if your customers just aren't showing up on, on a certain platform, then this makes sense for you to be there.
Yeah. So let's think about some numbers you can see. You can see, for one thing, how many accounts they have and which channels they're active in.
What kind of content they're doing.
What kind of content they're producing.
Yeah.
If they're a company, if you're in an industry that's highly visual, how much are they using Pinterest and Instagram compared to something that's a little bit less visual? Mm-hmm. How consistent are they in publishing and activating these profiles, or do they have zombie profiles? If you start to see zombie social media profiles at a company, you're starting to see a lack of management and a lack of control over their brand. So that's a real indicator. That can tell you the health of what's going on under the hood over there at the competitor's shop, to know kind of how they're doing. So that's good. So social media, because it is so on the table and in the open, actually gives you a lot of qualitative and quantitative measures that can be captured either as whole numbers or take the temperature short descriptions. You can have a 2 or 3 word description in your spreadsheet and capture that data and build that data over time.
And I like this one too, because it again gives you that bird's eye view of
Yeah.
like, where should we be investing our time?
Yeah.
You can't do all the things in all the channels at once. So where should we be investing our time?
Yeah, and that kind of takes us to our last point: consistency of online strategy. Something I love in SpyFu is you get this SEO spark line over time, and so looking at that tells you the real health of how someone's working and doing their online marketing. But also, once you have your own spreadsheet, you can see how it behaves over time.
Mm-hmm.
And so those two things together give you a really good full picture of the consistency of the leadership, the management, and the money investment, the time and energy investment in online marketing to let you know who's getting traction where. All right, that's it. Let's wrap up with that. Doing online marketing, competitor research. Hope this has been helpful. We'll see you on the next one.
See ya.